a.m. and 10 a.m. Events occur in real time.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to FPC Radio Live. We're Thursday. We're almost halfway to Super Bowl 56. That's right. The first week is almost in the books, and sooner or later, we're actually going to be talking about the actual game that's ahead of us between the Bengals, and the Rams. But before then, there's plenty of other stuff to get to. Yesterday, obviously, we spent the entirety of the show talking about one Mr. Tom Brady, of course, because he officially announced his retirement. And the show is always welcome to any sort of Tom Brady talk. That is never going to be shot down. I will always welcome it, even if it's not the point of topic. But today we do have some other things to get to. I will mention real quick though, for all the folks out there, worrying or talking about relationships. Bill Belichick called Tom Brady the best player in NFL history. I think that was a very, very thoughtful, very specific use of word. I mean, he didn't say quarterback. He didn't say Patriot. He didn't say this. He didn't say that. He didn't say of this era, of the Super Bowl era. He said the best NFL player of all time. And if there's any authority that's still alive right now that's qualified to speak on those type of terms, I'd say it's Bill Belichick, considering, well, the guys that are in contention for that best player of all time, he's been around them. And he's been around the game for quite some time.
Yeah, he's coached one, he's coached against three, and he's friendly with the other guy. That I would put my top five. Obviously, Brady I have at number one. Jim Brown,
yep,
at number two. Who
Jerry
Bill
Rice
Belichick,
and
yep. Jerry Rice he coached against. He coached obviously Lawrence Taylor,
yep.
and he coached against Reggie White. I mean, I think that's the consensus top five players in league history, especially if you're not going to just put all quarterbacks in there. So yeah, he's a historian among other things. So I'm glad he said that. I would have preferred greatest rather than best, but that's okay.
No, I'm glad he said best, because all the dumb. Okay, I'm going to censor myself there. All the knuckleheads out there that for the last couple of years have picked up this cause to try to explain how greatest of all time and best of all time are somehow different, although they're synonyms. Like, explain that to me, John. Like, how have we gotten this? This is how wacky people have made sports discussion because of Tom Brady. Like, you have people out here arguing that greatest and best are not the same exact thing, and they are.
Right.
They are. Like, that's not my opinion. That's just the laws of English and how the English language works. Like, say what you mean and mean what you say. So when you say, no, he's not he's the greatest, but he's not the best. Well, that's dumb. That doesn't make any sense logically, in English, anything. So I'm almost glad he said best, because anytime any sort of excuse me, well, remember goat versus boat, which was, again, silly to begin with, but I'm glad he said best, because now we can use that as ammunition for anyone who says otherwise. So no, end of the day though, I mean, it was a great statement from, again, people sit there. So, I'm sure there are people out there trying to, tell us how they're smarter than Bill Belichick and how Bill Belichick is wrong. But regardless of the fact that obviously he coached him, and they worked together for 20 years. Bill's just not going to say that. I think it was a tremendous compliment and well deserved. And quite frankly, I'm looking forward to this, moving past, hopefully, this era of picking and choosing who had more credit and who hates who more, when it's just like, what, I just want to be able to look back and enjoy what we saw from those two for the last 20 years, and not deal with the stupid, idiotic middle school drama that seems to be the focus of everyone's conversation when it comes to this. And it shouldn't be, because then again, it just kills the moment, it kills the situation, and I'd rather just appreciate it. And it was a nice thing from Bill to say that. And certainly, as a Brady fan, something I will certainly not ever live down, the fact that he called me the best player in NFL history.
Deservedly so.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, he is, and Joel said it best. He is the bestest. I don't know if that's quite English, Joel, but I will accept it, and it's better than trying to convince someone that greatest and best don't actually mean the same thing. So, all
So,
right,
this should have been the GOAT. He's also the boat now. The
yeah,
best of all
he's the
time.
goat. He's the boat. He's there. There's no sense in parsing the title. We've never done that before, ever, ever. I mean, it's only happened now because people can't explain how Tom Brady, 199th overall pick, is as successful. But again, I think even I mean, even the biggest, and you're one of them, one of the biggest Aaron Rodgers supporters. Maybe this was the year they finally were just like, you know what, I see maybe I can't explain the difference because it's hard to explain. There's no like clearly obvious thing that you can point to say this is why. Well, I mean, you can. You know what I'm saying, though, John. Like, there's no metric. There's no easy way to quantify. Why Brady is better than Rodgers. But I think even kind of the biggest hardcore Rodgers fans, even Packers fans, are like, you know what? I love it. Wonderful quarterback to watch. Great quarterback. Had a great career, but he just is lacking something. And it's not a bad thing because it's like what we talked about yesterday, John. The perspective, the how do you frame his career discussion? Well, are you framing it up against Tom Brady's, or are you framing it in a vacuum, which what it should be is in a vacuum? Because if it is, you can sit there and say, "Wow, I mean, Aaron Rodgers, we shouldn't be talking about him as a quote unquote choke artist at this point. We should be talking about him as having one of the greatest quarterbacking careers in NFL history." But we're not. We're talking about his failures. You know why? Because he's constantly put up against Tom Brady, and it's not fair to him. I mean, good God, it's not fair to him because he's not going to be able to live up to that. And that's not his fault. That's not on him. That's every quarterback in the history of this league. So it may seem like I'm picking on Aaron Rodgers, but I'm not. But I do think there is a segment of the fan base. I think part of it too is like, look, Tom Brady's retired, so they can breathe. They can. Oh, thank God.
Right.
So maybe they can. Maybe come out of that fog and sit back and be like, you know what? Got to tip your hat to him. There's a reason why, like, there's certain stats like I always talk about it all the time. The winning when throwing more. I mean, there's no player someone posted a graph yesterday. This is where graphs actually come in handy to kind of visualize the massive gap between some players in terms of certain accomplishments. And when you look at a graph of first of all, there's two of them. One, this was actually really, really cool. I saw this. Down 10 points in a game. Tom Brady, like you have every quarterback in the history of football is grouped together in the bottom low third of the graph. Okay, John? And then Tom Brady, upper right hand corner. You know what that means? He is one of one. He is a very unique, very once in a lifetime type player, meaning he wins more than any player in the history of the league when his team is down by at least 10 points in a game. And,
Right.
You couple that with his, again, if you looked at a graph of quarterbacks who attempted 45 plus passes, 50 plus passes, and correlated that with their wins loss record, once again, he'd be in the far right corner. Everyone else would be grouped together, on the opposite side. Because again, that's not a knock on those quarterbacks. That's just how the game is played, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you're looking at it. Tom Brady bucked the trend, and that's why his career is going to be very unmatched. And I think it's going to be quite a long time before we see. I think it would be quite some time before we see anything even come close, if that. I mean, maybe not even in my lifetime that we might see it, because again, it's not only the greatness, but it's the length of time, which I don't think, when we talk about, I don't know about you, John, but I'm big into like space documentaries, like the universe and all that type of stuff. I like to enjoy stuff that I really don't understand. It makes me feel smart. And
Sure.
at least I can pick up some talking points that kind of fool some people on the outside. But the point is, I'm fascinated sometimes with just how much we don't understand some of the numbers that they put out for us. So like, when you talk about the distance between here and Mars, like that's a number that's so hard to quantify or so hard for a normal person to visualize. When you say, you know, 50 million light years away, like I have no concept of how far that is, and most people don't, unless you work in physics and understand the you know what I mean, the actual meaning of all that. But that's what we're seeing almost with Tom. It's like there's no you can't quantify, you can't visualize the amount of time that he would had been successful. I mean, it's people say, "Oh, Patrick Mahomes," or "Oh, Aaron Rodgers," or "Oh, this," but like, yeah, it's great. They could have great seasons. You could have a quarterback come in and have 5 unbelievable seasons, and yet they would only be just a blip on the path to Tom Brady. You know what I mean? And that's what I think is one of those things that's always going to be kind of, maybe a year or two after, from now, when he's been out of the league for a couple of years. I think maybe you start to see those numbers a little bit better and understand, like, okay, maybe Patrick Mahomes goes another couple of years without sniffing the Super Bowl. Then you're like, wow, okay, now I understand. Now I understand how massive of a number that is. Like, to get from, one or two Super Bowls and playing 10 years to get to 7 and playing 22, that's like going from Earth to the moon and then Earth to like Jupiter. That's what we're talking
Right.
about here. That's how big of a gap and how much, how crazy it is when you think about in totality what his career is in relation to a lot of others. And hey, look, he's also, guess what? League's second leading receiver in his 40s, trailing only Jerry Rice by roughly 2,400 yards. But his 6 yards are good for second best, which is outrageous if you think about it. Like, think about this, John. Andrew Whitworth. Imagine if they call an offensive line play in the Super Bowl. Andrew Whitworth could catch a pass for 7 yards, and he would move past Tom Brady as the second leading receiver in their 40. That's kind of crazy. But
Yeah, Whitworth is 4 years younger than Brady, which is amazing.
yeah, and he's the old Grizzly veteran in the Super Bowl. But no, anyway, so I obviously I said I didn't want to spend too much time on it, but never take my word for that when Tom Brady is the subject. It always means we can go off rails. But I do want to talk about what else has been happening in the league the last couple of days. Obviously, we got wind, or we learned about the lawsuit being filed by former Dolphins head coach Brian Flores, alleging racism within the hiring process when it comes to him potentially getting a Giants job, and some past incidences with the Broncos in 2019 when he was in the coaching cycle. Then this is huge for so many reasons. I mean, you're talking about a guy who, you know, maybe we're just scratching the surface now, but it cannot go understated. You can't say enough about how big of a risk and how, courageous. I mean, I hate overusing words like that, because I think some, courageous and that type of stuff, equating, world, real world, military type stuff to everyday type things. I think, again, can get a little bit overboard, but in this situation, it is courageous, because he, for all intents and purposes, is a budding head coaching star in this league. You wouldn't know based on him getting fired by the Dolphins, but he's a budding head coach who is potentially throwing away every opportunity he could have in the future to make things better for him and those that aren't white coaches, basically everyone else but the old white coaches. And I mean, I'm going to be interested to see how this plays out, and what information comes out, because right off the bat, you have the NFL within an hour coming out and basically saying that the claims are meritless, which that says more about the NFL than it does about Brian Flores. Because to me, I'm sitting here thinking, like, well, how the hell can you determine that this quickly? You know what I mean? Like, and trust me, their history in terms of determining, facts versus non-facts, I don't trust the NFL to do that, because, well, they've never been able to do that. So what gives me the faith, or gives me the confidence to think that, hey, they're going to be able to go through and actually, they come out with this statement. I'm not going to sit there and be like, oh, well, you know what, maybe Brian Flores is just a little pissed off. No, no. This tells me, well, the NFL is clearly I, look, heads are going to roll in all of this. I think there's going to be a lot of. I mean, we're already seeing some collateral damage potentially when it comes to this lawsuit because it is against the NFL, it is against the Giants, and I believe the Broncos and Dolphins. But it's not so much just the hiring process, but the tidbit about Stephen Ross offering Brian Flores money to lose games. I mean, we all talked about it back then, John. During that it's tankathon for the Dolphins. That's what they wanted to do. Tank for Tua. Tank for Tua. Remember that tank for Tua. You know, it was
Yep.
all fun and games inside the media, but when you actually have owners encouraging coaches to lose games in order to get better, that's a problem. I mean, talk about integrity issues. I mean, that is a massive, massive issue. Forget about Spygate and Deflategate and all these things that the NFL made such a huge deal about. This is a big deal. Purposely losing games is akin to fixing. And guess what? we know how people take how they react to players or people or anyone fixing professional contests. They don't like it. And the fact that this could blow up is really just it's almost like I'm hoping it does. Like I want all this to blow up because I want it exposed. You have Hugh Jackson. I mean, good for him. He's coming out and saying a lot of the same things from his time with the Browns. And would you be surprised, John? I mean, I think on the surface we're sitting there saying like they are obviously wanting to lose games. Like the owners, they'll go out in the media and say, "Oh, we want to do that. We want to do that." But guess what? Yeah, they are. They're sitting there trying to lose games so they can get better draft picks. And guess what? Forget about the coach. I mean, who cares about Brian Flores' reputation? And good for him. I mean, the fact that he said, "Well, that's not how I roll." I love that. I love that.
Right.
That makes me love Brian Flores even more because it tells me that he is a man of integrity. So when he gets up here and he goes on national television, when he goes and has these interviews and sits there and says and decides that I'm going to be the face of this, there's nothing I can't. I mean the amount of praise and just respect and just admiration I have for Brian Flores just went through the roof because I think what he's doing is long, long overdue. I mean, I like, you know what I was thinking too. It's like we're sitting potentially seeing the same exact situation that he's talking about. When it comes to him going for an interview for the Giants, when the reality of it is he wasn't getting the job. Um, it was just a formality because they had to fulfill a requirement, which is again is a. I mean, the Rooney Rule's been a crock for a while. I mean, it's such a it's frustrating, John, because it's amazing that it's taken until now. It's 2022. It's taken until now for this type of thing to happen, and I don't blame anyone else for not doing what Flores does. I mean, again, this is borderline career suicide. I mean, he may not get another job offer. I mean, maybe he does, maybe he doesn't, but that's the risk that he's taking for the betterment of what the NFL should be, and that is inclusion. That is not, I mean, how can you have a league where I think roughly 70% of the players are African American and you have zero African American owners, one currently African American coach, and if you believe the reports, the Vikings are set to hire Kevin O'Connell, so he's not going to obviously fill that void as well. So that's a problem. That's a problem. And when we can sit here and talk about, in not so subtle terms and say, oh, well, there's obviously some favoritism here, blah, 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 and just, pass it off for years and years and years. Then all of a sudden we sit there and realize, yeah, they're at a massive disadvantage. Imagine, I can imagine this conversation going on. You're an assistant coach, you're in a group, there's few of you that are obviously, on that path to becoming a head coach. Okay. And you get the interviews. You're telling me you're not sitting there thinking, if you're an African American coach thinking, is this going to be a waste of time? Am I going to go in and talk to the Giants for 8 hours just so they can check a box in their process? Because that's what it seems like. That's what it seems like this Rooney Rule is being used for. And it's incredible. It's unfair. It's a massive uh, insult, and I can't believe right now in 2022 we're still dealing with it. So I'm eager to see what happens here. I'm eager to see what ultimately comes of this and what information comes out because from what we've heard, so far, the excuse me, there's support. There's people that are going to back up his statements. Obviously, Hugh Jackson has made some similar claims about being told to lose games on purpose. Obviously, both organizations have vehemently denied that. That's not surprising. That's just the process in which we go through. But on YouTube, one of our comments right here makes a great point. David Culley, the guy. I think we both sat there and said, I mean, given the circumstances, what he went through, he was basically a scapegoat for this organization to get past this Deshaun Watson nonsense, get past all this other nonsense that they dealt with. And guess what? They kick him to the curb after one season. And I'm sitting here thinking, like, how does that work? And all of a sudden you have guys that are having losing seasons after losing seasons, being given opportunity after opportunity. I mean, how many times did Jason Garrett have a mediocre team, and just because he clapped and the owner liked him, he got to keep his job? I mean, it's absurd, and I really hope that like I hope this actually leads to some sort of change. And I'm not talking about bigger end racism patches on the back of people's helmets. Like, I mean, that was so transparently. I mean, if anyone didn't see that as what it was, and that was a band-aid to appease the outraged public, then I don't know what to tell you. And I've every time I see that on the back of an end zone or back of the helmet, I laugh because I say they don't mean it. They don't care. You know what I mean? Like, there's no action being taken. Like, they'll sit there and they'll put out these quotes. So it's February, so it's Black History Month, so they're going to obviously celebrate all these things. But that's nothing to me. Okay, what that is, that's all surface. There's no substance to it, and what they're doing is just using that surface to deflect from actually doing anything about any of these issues. Because guess what? What is a end racism on the back of the end zone going to do? What does that do? Nothing. Nothing. To me, it's kind of just a slap in the face to say, "Oh, you guys are stupid enough to believe that we can just write this stuff on the back of the end zone and everything's going to be all fine." The reality of it is business as usual, and it has been for years.
Yeah, I mean, you can't legislate ignorance or hatred. So obviously, it has to come from within. And I look at a coach like Jim Caldwell, who, look at the success he had. He coached the Colts for 3 years, went to the Super Bowl his first year, made the playoffs his second year, and then in his third year, Peyton Manning was out for the year. So they tanked because they knew that they could get Andrew Luck at the first overall pick. He was the person that was just taking the bullets there. Then they fired him. He became the offensive coordinator with the Baltimore Ravens when they won the Super Bowl in 2012, when Joe Flacco had a great postseason. Then he goes to Detroit for 4 years, 36-28, 2 playoff appearances in Detroit. That's known as a dynasty in Detroit. And then he gets let go from Matt Patricia, who was a disaster there. And now Jim Caldwell has been on a few interviews. There's 9 new jobs openings in the NFL, and he can't be qualified for one of them. And just look at Brian Flores. Incredible success with the Dolphins the last 2 years, 19-14, beat Belichick 3 out of 4 times that they
with ownership actively wanting to lose too. I mean,
with wanting to lose, right? And then at that point, okay, he gets let go. Whatever, the team does what it wants. Why doesn't he get scooped up? I mean, Adam Gase was let go by the Dolphins, I believe, 4 years ago. What happened was the Jets fired him like the next day, and he was a disaster. At least he got a second chance. The black coaches don't tend to get many second chances, and that's just wrong.
Well, and like the Hawk says on, like I said, on YouTube here, you can saw the comment just a minute ago. I mean, Dan Campbell. I mean, the guy's talked about, like, I mean, he's revered because he talks old school football. And look, I'm not knocking Dan Campbell. I happen to like Dan Campbell. I do think there is something to say about his team playing for him. But again, that's the exact same thing you can say about David Culley. But that's not what's being said. What's being said is, well, David Culley failed. Well, no, he did not. He was put in a could not succeed situation. I mean, you went into that situation. I don't think anyone going into the year, especially with all the stuff going on with Sean Watson, I mean, he took the job in the middle of that,
Mhm.
basically to take it on the rear end for the organization. What did the organization do? Kicked him to the curb. First time head coach, kicked him to the curb after 1 year. The guy's not that young either, so there may not be another opportunity for him, but the organization made him a scapegoat, and all too often we see that with minority candidates as opposed to the Adam Gases of the world. Like, we all know Adam
Right.
Gase is a bad coach. Like, the second the Jets hired him, I laughed. I laughed. I laughed. I laughed. I mean, I like stomach laughed, Sean, because I was like, this is absolutely absurd. Like, why would you, watching what you saw in Miami, sit there and say, oh, you know what? This is the guy. No, no. So, like I said, this is obviously not going to be over anytime soon. This is something that will certainly continue to play out, and I hope. Like, I know, actually, Flores did go on an interview with the Saints, and I'm
Mhm.
hoping that maybe he does get a job out of all this. But that shouldn't stop what's happening and what's in progress now,
Right.
which is the wheels are in motion to hopefully actually make a change. And if it ends with bigger font on the text in the back of the end zone, then I'm just going to throw my papers up in the air and say, you know what, nothing's going to change at this point, and it's
Yeah,
a damn shame.
exactly.
So
Yeah, I mean, and you brought up a good point with David Tully. He went 4-13 with probably the worst roster in the AFC. Dan Campbell went 3-13-1 with the worst roster in the NFC, and he's being lauded as this great leader, this great coach, and David Tully's out of a job. I thought they were the two worst teams in football. I would be surprised if the Lions or Texans won more than 2 games this year, and both actually overperformed, so they both should be praised. Instead, Tully gets let go. And then the NFL will throw up, well, we've got other minority candidates. Robert Saleh, the head coach of the Jets, he's considered a minority because he's a Muslim. I wasn't aware that that's a minority. It's a religion, right? I mean, he's of Lebanese extraction. So now they're kind of putting that into, well, he's a minority. Or Ron Rivera is Mexican American, but fifth generation Mexican American. They're calling him a minority as well. But the NFL is just, and this is the individual teams. I don't know if Flores gets the job only because he's now suing the NFL, and the Saints are 1/32 of the NFL. So
yeah,
that would be kind of an interesting situation to have a coach leading you who, at the same time, was suing the league.
Don't overestimate the owner's ability to make the right PR move, though.
Oh, of course. They're pretty good at that. Yeah,
and
they're
that's
pretty good at that.
that's
And then
part,
they've
and
got
that's
Roger
part, but
Goodell as their president. Yeah,
and that's part of the issue too. That's part of the thing too. It's like, they look at it as like, okay, how can we fix this from a PR standpoint? All right, stickers on the back of the helmets. We're
Yep,
going to have a
exactly.
moment of silence. We're all going to have a weekend where we put Black Lives Matter on our cleats and end racism and all that stuff, and then a week later we forget about it. Because
Yeah,
guess
and the
what? We
halftime
did what
show of
we,
the Super Bowl.
we yeah
Yeah.
So
Halftime show of the Super Bowl is going to be Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg and Mary J.
yeah,
Blige.
and
This will keep everybody happy. Yeah.
it's so, to me, and again, I don't know if everyone sees it, and I'm not sitting here saying that I see things that others don't. I'm just saying, to me, it's very transparent in a very bad way, and I just don't see how others. Maybe they do see it. Maybe, and that's part of the problem, John. Maybe they do see it, and they're like, well, that's the NFL, and that's a problem in and of itself because you've come to expect that. So, this is, like I said, this isn't over. We're going to talk more about this tomorrow. Next week, obviously, we'll keep you updated on everything that's happening, give our opinion on what has happened from this point on. But of course, we're going to dive into the actual Super Bowl that is getting set to be played in 10 days, by the way. So, but we are going to cut it short. I know my man John's got things to do. He's got people to see, deals to make, swinging, dealing, all that stuff. So it's probably not like an eye doctor or anything like that. I'm sure it's some high intensity. Maybe going to the casino or something. Maybe
No. It is the eye doctor.
Oh, okay, all right.
No, it's the eye doctor, and it's actually kind of an emergency appointment. I want to go in there and have to take care of some problems before waiting till an appointment 3 weeks away. Why not do today what you have? I don't even know what the thing is. Why not do today what you have? Never mind. I don't know what to say.
just quit while you're ahead. That's it.
Quit while I'm ahead.
Quit while you're ahead.
That's what I'm going to do.
Oh,
absolutely.
Man. Well, like I said, fortunately, like I said, I think your eyes are getting fixed because you're starting to come around on Aaron Rodgers. So that's a good thing. That's a good thing. You're actually seeing what I see. But no, thank you everyone for tuning in. We will, like I said, we'll be back tomorrow. We'll probably mention a little bit of the Super Bowl and kind of dive into a little bit more of what comes out. But in the meantime, give us a follow on Twitter at FPC Radio Live. If you're not already, check out our Instagram. I know all the kids are into Instagram, and we're trying to up our game over there with some cool news. And we're going to be doing some giveaways. So give a search on that at Full Press Coverage on Instagram, and of course wherever you follow us on Twitter, Facebook, whatever. Just search and you'll find us. So, all right, guys. John, have a great day. Listeners,
you too.
Thank you very much for tuning in. We will be back tomorrow. Enjoy your Thursday.